Today, we're talking about connection, and specifically, we're looking at our ability to relate to one another. Listen, it's challenging at the bestest times, but now in the middle of COVID, holy cow, it's like a whole other level of crazy impact. And we need to challenge ourselves and pay attention to it and see how we be and thrive throughout it.
So Dr. Emma Seppala wrote a research paper on connectedness and health and a couple of other papers, which you'll find in our show notes. And basically, they say the following. We know that strong social connection leads to 50% increased chance of longevity, which means that our life is lengthened when we connect, and it strengthens our immune system, which we want now more than ever. It reduces inflammation and bolsters antiviral responses, which is so amazing just by connecting. And it helps you recover from disease faster. How cool is that? So if you're living on your own or you're living with a lot of people and feel disconnected, we want to help you kind of find solutions on reconnecting so that you can improve your immune system and reduce inflammation. And a lack of connection with social isolation and perceived social threat can actually, scary enough, increase your risk of death and induce the inflammatory response, suppressing antiviral immunity, which is the opposite of what I just mentioned. Note that acutely elevated inflammation would be adaptive under conditions where wounding is likely, but we can adapt. We can adapt. And chronic inflammation is something we're dealing with beyond just nutrition and exercise. It can come down to like our ability to connect socially and with ourselves and with other people. And if we don't connect, it can actually have detrimental health consequences. But it starts with connecting with yourself, right? So we don't have to, have tons of people around. We can work on self-connection, which is actually super important, because if you're not connecting to yourself, how are you going to reach out and connect to other people? It always starts with the self, which is why we talk about, we called this episode or this podcast, Embrace You First. So I mean, talk to me about that, Mary. What you were the one who actually brought this whole research paper into the show notes. So and I'm reviewing it, which I find really fascinating, actually, because I'm like, really? It actually increases inflammation? I'm like, what? I'm just reading this off, but right?
Well, I wanted to bring this up because it's not much different than the whole Chinese philosophy, because we always talk about, there's external causes of disease. And in this case, you're talking specifically about inflammation, right? So let's look at something like rheumatoid arthritis. We know that as an inflammatory condition, right? Which many people have. And then we talk about internal causes of illness, which can also include this rheumatoid arthritis that I'm speaking about. And so when we discuss internal is our emotional, our affect, how we feel. And guess what, guys? Our ability to relate to ourselves and to others directly influence how we feel. So it is so relevant and important, and especially now, and where I think it even can stoke up these emotions as we enter the holiday season, right?
Absolutely.
When we air this episode, it's literally Christmas time. I mean, I know not everybody will celebrate Christmas, but
they have holidays.
It's holiday time off, and it's holiday season. So it can be triggers, right? Mm-hmm. It can be triggering at the best of times. Sometimes people, going, oh my gosh, I don't want to see my family, or the opposite, or the stress of doing so much for your family. Or some people just don't have families, and that's a trigger as well. So really today it's important to look at, how we can connect, and in a more positive way and a not forced way. And in the end, it will impact your health and longevity. Like, how
Absolutely.
crazy.
Yeah. I have read that your social support network trumps, the relationship you might have with your doctor, your genetics, your nutrition, your exercise, in terms of your health and well-being. So I obviously all these other factors are huge in contributing to your health, but it's like the social support and the social network is like the icing on the cake. It kind of keeps you feeling sane and healthy. And if you're not well and you reach out to a friend, the placebo effect plays such a huge role. It's beyond placebo effect, right? It's like somebody is caring about you. And even if you put that message out to, a bunch of friends and they're all thinking positive thoughts, there's got to be some like level of energetics happening, and people are thinking healthy thoughts about you, and you're
Yes.
healing and getting better, right? So I mean, there's a lot of research even on that, like the power of prayer, or the power of positive thoughts, if you know what I mean. So I think that's
I totally know what you mean. Yes.
mhm,
And, you're speaking directly about energy, and that's what
right.
we're talking about in a different way. And,
Mhm.
we talked about this with Jill
Felt
Blakeway
like
about
way.
energy medicine, right? And, even if you think of twins, people that are identical twins and they live like thousands of miles apart, and you'll hear it's like, oh my gosh, I felt her pain. And she'll call up her twin and says, oh, she got into a car accident. I'm reflecting back to a patient of mine that actually had that happen.
Oh
Right.
wow. Yeah.
She felt a pain, and she woke up in the middle of the night, and it's like complete time change, 12 hours apart. She woke up in the middle of the night because her twin had a car accident at that time.
Right.
Like, so there
Wow.
is that interconnectedness, and
Yes, and when you
it
think
cannot
about
be
a friend
denied.
and you haven't spoken to them for a while, and they call you, and you're like, "Wow, I was just thinking about you." There's something to it,
Yes.
right? The
Yes.
energetics of and the power of thought. I think I used to
Yes.
kind of dismiss it and think that my mom, who really believed in that it was kind of hokey, but I just have had far too many experiences to dismiss it now. And it just goes to show you that, the power of positive thought, but also to reach out to people. And I think it's interesting, although we are in some ways disconnected since COVID times, a lot of people are saying that they're reaching out to friends more often through Zoom and phone calls, and having deeper, more intimate conversations, because there is less to do, right? Like, we were
Yes.
doing a Christmas lights drive through the other day as a fun thing to
Oh,
do, which was really sweet, because we always try to do things that are fun and things to look forward to, because apparently that extends your life too. But it's like, while we were doing the drive through, Griffin, our son, was calling his friend and showing him, and Michael, his friend Michael. So it was like, it's like that social connection. We can still do it. It's just trying to adapt and find ways around it. Because you might
yes.
not necessarily be able to go with another family, you can call the family and invite them
Yeah.
in. So,
Right. And so let's go dig into that a little bit more,
mhm,
because we traditionally will think automatically communication means talking, and
yes,
it's verbal, right?
right.
And yet we know, when in science we talk about actually communication, there's a huge component that is nonverbal, like 60 to
Yeah.
90% is
Yes.
nonverbal,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes. And
S-
mhm.
Yeah. So let's look at, how we connect, aside from talking,
Right.
but, in these challenging times, like how can we utilize the other nonverbal cues, right? So we talk about the five senses, and we bring five senses up a lot into different episodes. And today we're speaking specifically about relating it to relationship and connectedness and communication, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
you asked me last time, so I'll ask you, what are the five senses?
So I love to do this activity to actually help people kind of learn about ways to bring themselves out of the amygdala, the fight flight center, and into the processing center of the brain. And I know you just asked me what they are, but I just have to divert a little, like give a little backstory here,
Course.
because
Yeah.
yesterday I was on telemedicine with a patient. And I like to have them first, close their eyes and start with, thinking about five tastes, five smells, and then what are the feelings that they have, like five touch, like what do they feel? Do they feel their feet on the floor perhaps, or their breath? Not to over focus on their breathing so that they, hyperventilate, perhaps just recognizing the breath and the clothes on their body. So five tastes, five smells that make you feel calm and relaxed, that you love. Think about the five sounds that are in the room, perhaps my voice, their voice back to me, cars driving by. And then finally, after going through the taste, smell, touch, sounds, thinking about you opening your eyes and then looking around the room and seeing five of your favorite items that are of your favorite color. So just to kind of bring yourself into that processing part of your brain from the amygdala, the
Mm,
fight flight center. And her heart rate, this patient's heart rate was 95 beats per minute because she had been experiencing a lot of anxiety and panic. And after this 7-minute exercise, you can do it in 5 minutes, but because it was like, so the 5 5s in 5 minutes. But because I was explaining it to her, it took us 7 minutes and her heart rate went down to 65 beats per minute. And she
so
hadn't
awesome.
experienced that in months because she was having so many experiences in her life that was bringing her this anxiety panic state. And she was just floored. She's like, wow, that activity just brought me right back. And she had been trying to do deep breathing and such. So I think it's really important to connect to self by grounding yourself and bringing yourself out of fight, flight,
Yes.
freeze into the processing, connected, being in your body, right? So part of connection is just like recognizing that you can actually bring yourself into the here and now, and less into the worry about the future and loathing the past and dreading what's next because of COVID, or, it's just like sitting with what is.
I love this because, what you're basically alluding to is like, we're talking about connection. And of course, the first place we need to connect with is ourselves. So you're
Mhm.
starting with that exercise with through the five senses, and then utilizing your five senses, then you can then perhaps go out and connect with someone, touch
That's
someone,
right.
right?
Yes.
And so
It's really hard to do
through
that if you're frozen or if you're anxious, right? You can't even get into your own body. So before you eat, before you connect, before sex, with, calling
Zoom.
somebody on the phone, with Zoom, with patience, it's like finding that ability to just ground yourself so that you can actually hear and listen and focus.
So do you, just out of curiosity, do you physically do this exercise yourself before you see patients?
I will unconsciously, yes, like I will definitely, and or if my mind is distracted or wandering, then I will just bring my mind back to their voice and just like really focus on
Mhm.
their facial expressions. And that's why I love actually not going to work physically wearing a mask, because I can see people's, their facial expressions through the Zoom or the Jane platform, the telemedicine platform, because I find that there's just so much missing, and I can't hear. I actually
Yes.
didn't realize how much I read people's lips
Yes.
when they're
Oh my
talking.
gosh. Yes, exactly. And that's part of that communication. I mean,
Yeah.
don't you find yourself half the time you're like, what? Pardon?
Yes. I'm like,
When they're
everybody in my
masked.
ear. Yes. Yes. I'm like, I just want
Right.
to just lower the mask so I
Yes.
can see the
Yes.
lips. Yeah.
We all learn the art of lip reading more than we know. And
Yes.
then of course even just expression, whether it's smiling or because when you're only seeing a person literally from the eyes up, it's difficult. And yes, of course, you can see the shimmer in one's eyes, and it is giving us something, but it doesn't give us everything, right? The
Yeah.
cues. And so I think the lip reading, the smiles, and is just add another layer of connection. So, when it's interesting because you said this, that it's a preferred method now for you to connect with your patients
Yeah.
via virtual, because otherwise if you're in the same space, it's harder to communicate because you can't hear because everything's muffled, and then you
Right.
can't read their lips, right? So and
Right.
then the tone of their voice might sound different as well, right? Whereas
Yeah.
maybe you're less inhibited when you're on Zoom too.
Yep, definitely. And although there is that physical touch element, doing a physical exam, checking blood pressure, waist and hip circumference. Now my patients are doing that. Doing a thyroid exam. There's a lot you can see. Like usually I'm drawn to doing someone's thyroid exam just by looking at, like, seeing their neck. And I feel like that's the
Mhm.
only missing element, being able to do that physical exam, that touch. And there is a lot about just being like, that communication. However, in general medicine, like going to a medical doctor through OHIP, their exams are now limited to every 3 years.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that we cannot, unfortunately, discover beyond the vitals, checking heart rate, blood pressure, respiration rate, that there's not much you like. If you find something that's a little bit off, often it is based on symptoms and symptom history. And then we're just referring them for ultrasounds and x-rays and, further diagnostics anyhow. So there
Mhm.
is some elements that are missing, but I would say that there's so much that I feel like I haven't missed anything, to be honest, in the almost year that I've been doing it. Well, March will be a year,
Right.
right?
Well, but
Mhm.
I'm going to address something though, right? People
Yeah,
do miss touch. So,
they
what
do.
can you do yourself is
Yes.
self touch,
Yep.
right? But then the other thing is, thankfully the government has seen that um, healthcare workers that are regulated health professionals like myself as
Mhm.
acupuncturists, osteopaths, chiropractors
Yeah.
that are still people facing,
Yep.
that is considered essential because of that lack of touch, right? I don't know if this is how the government
I feel like
policies
it's
it,
essential
but
going for
right?
massages and having
Massage,
acupuncture.
yes.
Like it's so like therapeutic. Like it's that extra element because you're missing it, right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
Right? Like, people are not hugging anymore. It's awkward now, actually.
I know.
Like when you
You're
say goodbye,
like
there's,
elbows,
yeah,
or
right?
like,
And
or like
like
virtual, like, fist bump.
everything we
Like,
do, I feel like there's this awkward, there's
yeah.
this discomfort.
Yeah.
You walk down this street and I'll notice like this neighbor will just, instead of staying on the sidewalk, will go on the road, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's this discomfort, this awkwardness, and
Right.
I don't know how long it'll last, but it is there.
Hmm.
So, how can we be comforted by that? Can we still then look in the eyes of the other and engage that way and connect?
And perhaps even just send through that physical, that smile, but also like I've actually been trying to do this. Sounds kind of hokey, but like send that energy, like that grounded, loving energy. Like, there's been times in your life where you're a little frustrated with somebody. And I've always said to myself, okay, just send love, 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 and just to
Yes.
help soften that person. Sometimes you can't take somebody out of stress or anger or, making you feel irritable. So you just send them love. So it's the same thing. Like it's different. Maybe you might not be irritable. You're just like seeing a neighbor and you're just like, I'm sending you love. Like, even like just
You know what?
that energetic.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for this because this brings me to this point. When we are in this kind of place of COVID and there's, overall fear, but then this pandemic fear, um, what we know in research, and years ago I saw Dr. Jampolsky, and they were talking about how love and fear cannot coexist.
Mhm.
So when you have fear, there is no love. When you're running from fear, like living life through fear, we
Right. Because you're
cannot
not
love.
connecting. Right.
You cannot connect.
You're,
So for you
mhm.
to tell people, yes, just come from love, exude love, think love in your head, right?
Mhm.
And I'm laughing as I say this because my father just told me he lives in a condo. And he says
Yeah.
he was with my mother in the elevator, and this Uber driver or whatever was trying to send a delivery order. I guess he has to be on time or whatever. And
Mhm.
he was trying to tell my father to leave the elevator because it's like, because it's a small elevator and you can only really have two people in the elevator. And it's like my mom with him. It's almost like two people because it's the same family. But anyway, this guy's freaking out. And then, so of course, my father was triggered and this guy's triggered because there's no love there. And all it
Oh,
is running from fear. So there
yeah.
is no connectedness there.
Right. Yes, I was running
Right?
down the street and there was a senior couple got really kind of discombobulated because I went closer than the 6 meters, but I was like kind of just about darting around them. But as I was doing that, they're moving on the grass and they're just like infuriated that I went more like 4 feet instead of 6 feet. But I was in the middle of going 6 feet, because you're running, right? So I think I threw them
Yes.
off and just mad. And I just smiled and like, thought, love, I'm sorry. Like, I'm just fast. Like, I'm going to dart. Don't worry. I'm going to
Yes.
dart around you. But they just,
Yes.
like you have to like understand where people are coming from. And, there is a lot of fear. I
Yes.
mean, when you're outdoors, you're not going to be like transmitting the virus 4 feet away, but you still have to keep to your 6 feet. And I was, but in that moment, they didn't know it. So yeah. So it's just
Yes.
like
Of
what I
course.
could have just been, oh, those annoying people. But instead I was just like, love, like just send that energy because it's the only thing I can do in that moment. Yeah.
No, and that is so great. And so, people that are listening to this or watching this will certainly be more aware than others who are perhaps just one-sided. So, for us that are watching, listening, being a part of this, then just know, like, have place for empathy and love show up so that, we're not triggered by other people's reactions or what they say to us, right? So we're
Mhm.
getting off tangent, but so at the end of the day, we're basically saying, um, to connect, it is beyond just the verbal, and we can connect eye to eye, and which you still can do through Zoom, through virtual
Yes.
consults with your health practitioners, right? And then for others that, if you're in fear of, but like you're not connecting with yourself and you're feeling not so well, we started off the podcast with telling you that disconnectedness and isolation decreases longevity, increases inflammation, right? So it's important to get connected in however way that works for you, that you feel safely doing so.
And perhaps if you're somebody who has a harder time communicating in this platform, because maybe you are more of a physical communicator and don't have much to say, you're sitting in silence, that's okay too. There are little tools that you can use, like Cool to Connect. There's this friend of mine that I met through a mind share, Dana, and she created Cool to Connect, which is a bunch of cards that you pull out and ask questions. We're going to do some of those through some Instagram to have fun, asking each other questions, just like anything. It could be like, what would you tell your 7-year-old self? Or if you could go back in time, which we're actually going to do an episode on that.
Yes, of course.
Yes. Yeah, just in general, like 36 questions to fall in love. So like, if you're feeling like, you're locked up, housed up with your partner and you're feeling like kind of perhaps you're like, really doing well and enjoying each other's space, but you want to enhance that and improve your already amazing relationship. Or maybe you're feeling a little disconnected and feel like you need space and transitions. We want to encourage you to do that. But also, when you do come back to connect, you could ask those types of questions of each other to kind of reconnect, right?
I love this. Yes. So sorry, this is an app, or is
36.
this is
So 36 questions to fall in love is just 36 questions on the internet. And then
oh,
Cool to Connect is like a deck of cards that this amazing entrepreneur decided to create, and
okay.
which we're going to get
We'll
and
have it in the
have
show notes.
fun.
I'm writing it down so that I can actually put it into the show notes. I'm like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Yes.
love the
Yeah.
spontaneity.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm looking at our time, and you know what? I think this was juicy enough, and we can just, talk more about that and later. But
Mhm.
as part of the connection, I think it would be really lovely to always end our show on a high note, talking about what basically lights us up, what fills our cup. And then after we do that, the request is that you do that for yourself. What filled your cup today? So today, what filled your cup?
So today I actually went for a run, which is kind of why I was late. So I'm sorry I was delayed. I was like, I really need to go for a run. And I went by the waterfront, and it's gorgeous. And I love just connecting to nature. I connect to self by going for that run and giving myself the time and space to do that. And then also just being able to be near nature. It just really helps me feel grounded.
Mm, that's so awesome.
And how
Thank
about
you.
you? How about you?
Well, gosh, there's so many things. And
Yeah.
one was, I'm so grateful that for technology, and because
Mm,
being busy, 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 like I love learning. And so what fills my cup was the ability to learn a little bit today. And I was um, listening to an audiobook, and that
oh,
was so great. And then, I
wow.
just think that the more we read and in this way consume via audio,
Yeah.
book. I get to open up my mind, different perspectives, or perhaps, just articulating differently than what I know it to be. And so that it can like seep through into my body more. Do you know what I mean? So anyway,
Absolutely.
I just love that.
I value learning so much, and it helps to keep our brains active, create new nervous system, like neural networks, and prevent dementia, right? Because
Yeah,
let's
for
face
sure.
it, there's a lot of us who are getting potentially that way. So we got to avoid it or delay it.
Yeah, well, it's like a muscle and we don't want to lose
Mhm.
it. So we want to keep it
Mhm.
active. So
Yes.
yes. So hopefully you will share our podcast. You'll love it. Subscribe, connect with us. And by the way, if you're listening to as a podcast, and even if you're not, if you're watching this, go on to Apple Podcasts and please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating and comment and do a screenshot. And at the end of the month, we will draw a name and you will have the chance to win a 30-minute consult with either Dr. Tanya or myself. It'll be freaking awesome. You'll love it. And you just DM us the screenshot with your name and contact, and woohoo, away we go.
Amazing.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.